Today we're going to go over the study sheets for universal science, okay, for M1 universal science. So we have had time in the classroom to go over the study sheets. I hope you guys were able to fill in most of what is there. I want you guys to try to do these on your own first before we go over them together, because I want you to give it a really good try to see how you're doing. Okay. I want to know if you know this stuff or you don't know this stuff. And if you don't know it, look it up in your workbooks. Okay. So all the information is in your workbooks. All right. So today we're going to go over the study sheets together to make sure you've got the correct answers, so that when you're studying on your study sheets, you'll know the right information. So all the information that's on the study sheets will be on the exam. Okay. Just to make your life a little bit easier. All right, so now I've been having a really rough time trying to share this with you, so let me see if I can figure it out this time. I sure hope so. I'm not sure why it's giving me such a hard time. So just give me a minute here while I try and share my screen with you. Okay, let's try and turn it into a slideshow. And it's not working. Oh, okay. I don't understand this. I don't know why this isn't working. It doesn't look like it's working. If it is working, I'd be quite surprised. But for some reason, every time I turn on the slideshow, it kicks me out of sharing mode. Yeah. Oh, okay. Well, let's go through the slides just as they are then. So if this doesn't work, I'm not wasting any more time on this. So let's go through this. Universal Science Final Exam Review. I will at least share with you the I'll share with you the window without the slideshow. So we'll do that instead. Okay, here we go. So we've got it all set up. You guys can see this now. And so all the answers are going to pop up. We aren't even going to be able to go through them like I normally do in class with you, where you can actually think about what the answer is. So all the answers are just going to come up, and I'm just going to explain to you why they are that answer. All right, so the first thing that you're doing on your study sheet is you are going to be, oh, this isn't even working. Oh, here we go. Okay, so on your study sheet, the first thing that you do is you look at two different organisms. Okay, eastern gray kangaroo. It's got a scientific name, Macropus gigantus. Whoa, what a name! And a feral European rabbit. What does feral mean? Does anybody know? Feral? Feral just means wild, not domesticated in any way. So it's not like a dog or a cat that has been domesticated in order to be tame and lovely. These guys are feral, they're wild European rabbits. And his scientific name is, I have no idea, Oricotoctrylus cunninculus. I don't know. These are Latin names. They are a mouthful, but very important. Scientific names are given to animals. Each animal has only one scientific name that is made up of two other words, okay? A genus and a species. So they are really important in naming animals, okay? So every single animal on the planet has a very specific two-word name, scientific name. All right, so you've seen the kangaroo and the rabbit. So scientists use physical characteristics in order to find out the relatedness of animals. Doesn't always work, but there are some similarities, and they can look at this. So in the table below, it says to place a check mark in the box for each physical characteristic of each organism. Answer the questions below the table. Okay, so the eastern gray kangaroo, does it have fur? Yes. We can see from the picture it has fur. And if you know anything about kangaroos, yes, they've got fur on them. Okay. The rabbit, yes, the rabbit has fur as well. The eastern gray kangaroo does not have long ears. If you look at its ears, they're around the same size as a dog or a cat or something like that. And we don't think of them as having long ears. Okay. But when it comes to rabbits, yes, his ears are quite long. Okay. Kangaroo moves on two legs. Yes, it does not run on all four legs. It only moves on two legs. The rabbit, no, the rabbit runs on all four. Sorry. And do they both have tails? Yes. Kangaroos have tails that actually help them to keep their balance. So his tail is very important. The bunny rabbit, he also has a tail, but his tail is right up snug against his bum and goes up his back a little bit. That little white patch is his tail. So again, I apologize on your photocopy. The picture of the rabbit is very dark. It's hard to see. So don't worry about it. The picture that will be on the exam, the pictures on the exams, hopefully will be better quality. But I do also have labels on those pictures to help you understand what's the important part about those pictures, okay? So they both have tails, yes. Now, kangaroos hop because they move on two legs. Rabbits, you know, we have been given this stereotype, this crazy, not really stereotype, but we've always been fed the idea that rabbits hop on their back feet. They don't. In cartoons, they hop around, but when you look at rabbits, they don't hop. They scamper a little bit, but they use all four legs. Hopping would require only two legs. So kangaroos definitely hop. Rabbits definitely don't. Okay. And then a pouch for their babies. Kangaroos have a pouch. Rabbits don't. Kangaroos come from a special class of mammals called marsupials. Marsupials are mainly from Australia. Australia has all kinds of marsupials. Koala bears are also marsupials. Tasmanian devils are marsupials. They have a little pouch for their young as well. Okay, so they're quite unique animals to have a pouch for their young. So kangaroos have a pouch, rabbits don't. All right, so now that we've looked at the physical characteristics of each of these organisms, it is nice to be able to put it in a table form so that we can compare. What do they have in common? What do they have that's different? Okay, so compare and contrast. Okay, so we'll go on to the next page here. Again, I wish that my slideshow worked for you guys, but now all of the answers are just going to come up on the screen. Okay, so we've got the table that we found, we worked on. And then which physical characteristics do both organisms have in common? So you look on your little chart and you see that they both have fur, they both have a tail. Okay, it's that easy. You look at the check marks. Okay, and then name one physical characteristics that kangaroos have but rabbits don't have. Well, you've got three of them to choose from. So they are moves on two legs, hops, or has a pouch for babies. Okay, so you just look in your table and you see where are the check marks that are on the kangaroo side but not on the rabbit side. There you go. And then the opposite. Name a physical characteristic that rabbits have that kangaroos don't have. Okay, so you look on your table. Oh, rabbits have long ears, but kangaroos don't. Now, just because they share some physical characteristics in common, does that mean they're closely related? Not necessarily, no. They could be, but again, just because they have the same physical attributes does not mean that they are genuinely closely related. We don't know that until we do another type of testing, which is usually DNA testing. Okay. So, when scientists first started to classify animals, and of course, the classifications were solely built just on the physical characteristics of the animals, so what they looked like. Of course, there were lots of mistakes made at that time because like we looked in our notebook, a giant panda and a red panda look very similar to each other. They even have the same common name. They're both called pandas. But when you look at it, they are very far away from each other when you look at the DNA. Okay? Because a red panda is more closely related to a raccoon, and a giant panda was more closely related to a like a Malaysian sun bear or something like that. Yeah. So it was amazing the difference between them. Okay. They look similar, but they really are not. So scientists did the best they could with what they had, which was their eyes at the time, to make, observations about the physical characteristics of these animals, and that's the best they could do. So over the years, the classification of animals has changed a lot. They've had to move different animals to other things because they found out through DNA testing that no, these animals are not closely related like we thought because they looked a lot like each other. They're actually more distant cousins to each other. All right. Okay, so on your test, I will be giving you two animals to look at and to compare their characteristics in a chart the same way. Okay, you'll have to look and see, does it have this, does it have that, and then answer some questions about it. All right, this next one. Again, I don't know how many times we've gone over this, guys, but this is really important. So I ask that you please pay attention. Okay, so when we look at naming animals, we start with three domains. Every living thing on the planet, whether it is a bacteria, whether it is a plant, whether it is a large animal, anything that is living on this planet fits into one of three categories. Okay, and those are the three domains. Okay, it is the largest classification of animals. Everything fits within one of those three domains. So we've got bacteria, number one, we've got eukarya, number two, and we've got archaea, number three. So archaea are made of eukaryotic organisms. So eukaryotic, meaning they have cells that have nuclei in them. Okay, that's the most important thing about a eukaryotic organism is they are made of eukaryotic cells. They are complicated animals. They usually are multicellular, meaning they have more than one cell. Okay, and when you talk about people, we are in the domain eukarya. Okay, we are in the domain eukarya and the kingdom Animalia. Okay, and people are multicellular. We are made of many, 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 many cells. Because we're multicellular, our cells specialize. We have cells that are only skin cells. We have other cells that are only bone cells. We have other cells that are only muscle cells. Okay? And we have hair cells. We have all kinds of cells. Okay? We have nerve cells and everything in our body. So you put all those cells together and they all work together to keep us alive as an organism. So it's really important. So the three main domains, bacteria, eukarya, archaea. Eukarya are made of eukaryotic organisms, eukaryotic cells. They all have a nucleus and membrane-bound organelles. The other two, bacteria and archaea, are prokaryotic, meaning they are very simple cells. They do not have a nucleus. The DNA in a bacteria and a eukarya cell is usually just a string of DNA. Okay, it is not packed tightly into a nucleus of any kind, and the cells are very simple cells. Okay, most bacteria, most archaea are single celled organisms, which we call them unicellular. And unicellular organisms must be able to do all of the functions they need to live by themselves. They don't have the luxury of having many, many different types of cells to work together to make that organism live. A bacteria and archaea, they're prokaryotic. Those prokaryotic cells must have everything they need to survive. They must be able to do it all. They have to be able to introduce materials into the cell. They need to be able to get waste out of the cell. They need to be able to reproduce on their own. They need to be able to use energy. They need to be able to respond to stimuli. Remember, we talked about the things that living things, the characteristics of living things that they all share. These single celled organisms have to do all of that on their own. All right. So, bacteria, archaea, prokaryotic, and they are two big domains. Okay. Eukarya can also be broken down into uh, four different kingdoms. Okay. So the first kingdom, like when we look at our worksheets, the first kingdom was Protista, okay, or protists. Protista are usually unicellular eukaryotic cells. Now, when we think of a unicellular cell, we usually think of prokaryotic cells, but that's not the case. This is a special case. These are unicellular eukaryotic cells, meaning quite complex cells. Things like seaweed, okay? We look at seaweed in the ocean and we automatically think it's a plant. No, it's not a plant. It is a protist, okay? And it's one of the few multicellular protists in the kingdom of Protista. Okay? Another good one to think of is amoebas. So amoebas are little unicellular eukaryotic cells, and you may have heard of amoebas. There's a really good there's good videos on the internet, the Amoeba Sisters. They talk about science, all different scientific topics, and they are excellent, very detailed. So the Amoeba Sisters are really good. But amoeba, you may have heard of amoeba. Okay, when it comes to the other protists, there's all kinds. There's dinoflagellates, there's euglena, there's paramecium, there's all these other ones, but I don't expect you to remember those ones. So please, for the exam, try to memorize that seaweed and amoebas are two examples of protists, okay? Because you will have to be able to write some examples of these on the exam, okay? Okay, so plants, I'm going to leave that blank. You should be able to name some plants. And on the exam, please don't just say trees. Please don't just say flowers. Be more specific, okay? Maybe you're thinking of a apple tree, maybe an oak tree, maybe a maple tree. Okay, think of some flowers: sunflowers, roses, carnations, lilies. Think of something else other than just tree or plant. Okay, no problem. And when it comes to fungi, again, this is a bit of a tough one to get a good grip on. So fungi, mushrooms, yeast, mold, okay, things like that. I want to try to play you a video, but unfortunately, videos aren't working right now because the internet is not that strong, especially when I'm using Google Meet. So sorry, I can't show you any videos. That's a real shame because I've got some really good ones that we can use to augment this information, but I'm sorry, I don't have them. But anyway, fungi. So when I think of fungi, I think of a pizza. Okay, so what topping do I like on my pizza? I love mushrooms on my pizza. Okay, so I can think of, okay, try to remember pizza, fungi, mushrooms. Okay, mushrooms is a fungi. Also, what makes that crust on that pizza rise up and be nice and thick and fluffy? Yeast. Okay, so I can think of a pizza and I can think of two different types of fungi. So try to remember those for the exam, of course, because you're going to have to give examples on different fungi. Another one, here's another one to give you as well, is mold, because mold is a fungi that is very easy to remember. Everyone knows what mold is, probably got some growing in the shower. It's annoying. It's always there. We're always trying to scrape it off. But mold is another type of fungi. All right. And then Animalia is the fourth kingdom of Eukarya, the domain Eukarya. Animalia, and you guys can name some animals. You can name shark, whale, fish, insects, but don't just say insects. Say a spider, say a dung beetle. Think of anything, okay? And you can make them funny too, as long as it fits with the examples, okay? All right, on the bottom of this, it says seaweed is in the domain Eukarya. Which kingdom does seaweed belong to? So you would look through Protista, Plantae, Fungi, and Animalia. A lot of times you might think it's Plantae, but it's not. It's Protista. Okay, seaweed is one of the very few multicellular organisms in the kingdom Protista. All right. So I hope you don't have any problems with this page. If you do, please let me know, ask me, and we can go over this again, okay? But please try to remember that domains are the biggest, okay? They're at the top of that inverted pyramid that we keep looking at. Domains are on the top of that. And there's only 3 domains to remember. So remember bacteria, eukarya, archaea, okay? And remember whether they are eukaryotic or prokaryotic cells. All right. Now, we also looked at cladograms. Okay, cladograms are also called branching diagrams because they've got a whole bunch of branches on them. I like to keep it nice and simple for you guys because this is the first time you're seeing cladograms. So we get cladograms that have one branch with one animal at the end of each branch. Cladograms can be very complicated. They can have 2 to 3 animals at the end. They can have a whole strew of them. I mean, they can be very, very complicated. But for our purpose, we want to keep this simple so that we can understand how a cladogram works. Okay? Cladograms are not used to find unknown organisms. Cladograms are used to describe the characteristics that differentiate between the different organisms and that also show any type of similarities to different animals. Okay, so they show relativeness. So use the branching diagram to answer the questions. Okay, so it says here, what is the scientific name for this branching diagram? Okay, it's a cladogram. It's got it on the title. Okay, so don't get this mixed up with a dichotomous key. A dichotomous key is a different diagram altogether. This is called a cladogram. So when we look at our cladogram, we see that this one's got a leopard, a turtle, a salamander, tuna, and a lamprey. And then we have what's called a lancelet. Okay, and it says outgroup underneath of it. It's called an outgroup because it does not share any of the physical characteristics that any of these other animals share with each other. So it's quite weird. Yeah, it's quite a strange one. All right, so on this cladogram, which characteristic do leopards, turtles, salamanders, tuna, and lampreys all share? Okay, so in order to do that, we're going to go leopard, turtle, salamander, tuna, and lamprey. Okay, so when we get to lamprey, we go down the lamprey arm to the the timeline is pretty much what it is, okay? Now, a backbone or a spine has started before lamprey joined this type of diagram. So when you go to the bottom part of this here, the left side of the line that everything is attached to, this is a timeline. The left side of that line is the earliest time, and then the right side of it by leopard is the latest time. So he would be the most current, how do I say that? Most current rendition of that animal. Okay. So you go from lamprey because you're talking about all of these things sharing something in common. You go to the backbone or spine. So backbone or spine came in before lamprey and after lancelet. So lancelet does not have a backbone or spine, but a lamprey, a tuna, a salamander, a turtle, and a leopard all have a backbone or a spine. Okay. What characteristic do leopards, turtles, and salamanders all share? Same sort of thing. So you go to salamander, and then you got tuna, and that. Okay, so you go down there, and they all share 4 walking legs. So I don't know how tuna have walking legs, but oh, sorry, tuna's not on there. I'm looking at the wrong question. Okay, so you go to salamander, and you go right behind salamander, 4 walking legs. Okay, so that makes more sense. Okay, so a salamander, a turtle, and a leopard all have 4 walking legs. That characteristic, that physical characteristic, showed up on the timeline in between when the tuna and the salamander are on it. So everything above the line has that trait. Everything below the line does not have that trait. Okay. Which characteristic separates tuna from lamprey? Okay, tuna, lamprey, which is the characteristic in between them? Jaws. So we can say tuna have jaws because jaws came in and then tuna. But lamprey don't have jaws. They are a weird little fish. Yeah, they don't have a jaw. Okay. So I'm hoping that makes sense to you. Again, if you have problems reading these things, let me know. We'll try and do some more examples in class before the exam. I want to do that anyway with you guys, so I'll see if I can find some and we can go over them together. There is a little bit of this on the exam. It's not a lot, so if you messed it all up, you're not gonna fail the exam because of it, okay? So you don't have to worry about that. But it is good to know. You have to know this for the exam. Okay, next up. Okay, so those are cladograms. Those show the characteristics that different organisms share, and they also kind of talk a little bit about the relativeness of these different animals to each other. Okay, this next diagram, or this next thing, is called a key. It's a dichotomous key. Okay, a dichotomous key is now the one that we use to identify unknown organisms. So if we don't know what something is, we can use a dichotomous key to find out what the common name of it is. We can also find out what the scientific name of this thing is, depending on what kind of key we're using. So it's very handy, especially if we don't know the scientific name of an animal. So on the exam, I could give you animals that you know from looking at them, but I could give you their scientific names, and you'll have to find out what their scientific name is using the dichotomous key. Okay? So we've got 2 dichotomous key here. We have 2 unknown animals. At this point, we know what they are because all the answers are on there. Sorry, guys. But this is a very handy tool. So it says here, use the dichotomous key to find the name of the unknown organism. Circle each correct answer in each pair as you follow the instructions. Okay, I'm asking you to circle which one is correct so that you keep track of what you're doing, okay? It's easy to lose your place in these things and get all kerfuffled up, okay? So please make it easier on yourself and circle the correct answer as you go. Okay, so we've got this bird. And question number 1 says, it has sharp talons, which are claws, or it does not have sharp talons or claws. So I've included a picture of the feet of this little bird, and it does have very sharp talons. Excuse me. So we circle A. It has sharp claws, and it tells us to then go to step 2. So we go to step 2. It says it has ear tufts or it does not have ear tufts. Ear tufts are little feathers on birds that stick up that make them look like they have little ears that stick out. Okay. Usually you'll see ear tufts on like owls and things like that. Owls will have these extra feathers that stick up even higher than their ears. Okay. So this little hummingbird, his head is totally smooth. He has no ear tufts. Okay, so it does not have ear tufts. So we circle B. It tells us to go to step 3. So we go to step 3. Has a featherless head, has feathers on its head. This type of bird is totally covered in feathers. Okay, it has feathers on its head. So we circle B. We go to step 4. Has bar-like markings on its chest, has a solid chest. Bar-like markings would just be bands or strips of color across its chest. This bird does not have that. It has a solid colored chest. Has a little bit of pink on the side here, but it's all one color. Okay? Has a solid chest. Go to step 5. Has a long pointed beak, does not have a long pointed beak. Definitely has a long pointed beak, okay? Go to step 6. Has a straight beak, does not have a straight beak, okay? So it has a straight beak. It's a hummingbird, okay? Hummingbirds are amazing birds. They have to have a very long beak because they have to go into the flowers to get the nectar from them. So they are able to access nectar from flowers that other animals are not able to get to. For instance, a bee. A bee may not be able to crawl all the way in the back of a flower to get at its nectar. Well, a hummingbird with its long pointed beak would be able to do that. So yeah, it's amazing how these things. Now, did you know a hummingbird is the only bird that is able to fly backwards? So if you get a video of a hummingbird eating from a hummingbird feeder, you'll see that he's able to hover in the air. He'll take some nectar, and then he'll back out, and then he'll back, and then he'll fly off. They are amazing. They are beautiful to watch. So I suggest you look up a video of a hummingbird, guys, if you haven't seen one. And we do have hummingbirds here. They're beautiful. They're just hard to see. You would need to maybe hang a feeder out in order to attract them to come to your home. Okay, the next dichotomous key is pretend we don't already know what it is. Okay, pretend we're going to find out from using the key. So we go to number 1. There's 2 questions, and there's only one right answer. It has more than 6 legs, or it has 6 legs or less. We count on here. He's got 2 at the front. He's got 2 in the middle, and he's got 2 on the back. He has 6 legs. So we go to step 2. We circle B so we don't get all confused, and we go to step 2. Step 2 says he has wings or he doesn't have wings. He definitely has wings. So we circle A. We go to step 3. Single pair of wings, 2 pair of wings. He's definitely got 2 pairs of wings. We go to step 4. Wings are nearly equal size. Correct. 4 wings are larger than the hind wings. 4 wings are the wings at the front. Hind wings are the wings in the back. No, his front and back wings are about the same size. So he is a dragonfly. Okay. So again, on the exam, you will be given 1 dichotomous key, 1 unknown organism. I can guarantee you most likely will not know the common name of this animal. and you will have to use the key in order to get to the common name. Okay. Um, it's worth 5 or 6 marks, I can't remember. So I want you to circle all of the correct answers as you go so that I know if you messed up one of the questions, I can still give you some part marks for the questions that you did get correct. Okay? So please read the directions carefully and follow them as you do this exam. Okay, next up. Okay, so we're looking here at the 8 levels of classification of organisms. Okay, so it says for us to fill in the missing levels of classification. And you can see on the side, it also says there's a little yellow box that says very general, contains many organisms. And then the box on the bottom says very specific, contains closely related organisms. So as you start in the domains, remember, we talked about the 3 main domains: bacteria, archaea, eukarya. Those are your 3 domains. Those are the biggest classifications. That's where all the organisms fit. As we start going down this organization, this upside down pyramid, we start getting fewer and fewer more related organisms, okay? That's what's most important about this. Okay, so the top one is domain. Under domain is always kingdom, okay? And in our class, you don't need to know about phylum, class, order, family. I know when we were doing CK12, there were some questions on those ones. They will not be on the exam. Only know your domains, know your kingdoms of eukarya, excuse me, and know genus and species down at the bottom of the pyramid. Genus and species are very important because those are the 2 classifications that make up a scientific name. Okay, the first part of a scientific name is your genus, the second part is the species. Excuse me. Okay, so the 8 levels of classification, you only need to know the top 2 and the bottom 2. The rest of them you'll learn in upper grades. Darn it. The classification of living organisms into the above levels is called taxonomy. That is the study of organizing and classifying, naming living things. Okay, some people work all their lives in taxonomy, and they do a lot of work with very detailed things like looking at DNA and stuff like that. It's very interesting. All right. Sorry, I'm starting to get stuck in my throat. Yeah. Okay. So, 2 characteristics scientists use to classify living things: physical characteristics and chemical characteristics. Okay. Physical characteristics are things that you can see. Sometimes you can't see them. Sometimes we talk about the skeleton, we talk about the bones, things like that. So you can't see that, but that is a physical feature of that animal. Okay. So eye color, wing shape, physical characteristics are things like if it's got webbed feet, if it can fly, if it's got a long neck, if it's got a tail, if it's got, all these things about it. So a lot of them are visual, but not always. Okay. So some of them are if it's got a backbone, if it's got a special nerve running down that backbone, things like that. Okay. Chemical characteristics, things like DNA, proteins, hormones. Okay. All these different things can be used to also pinpoint whether these animals are related to each other or not, and which classification they belong in. Okay, DNA is more reliable way to classify organisms. Why has the classification system changed over time? So I know a lot of you struggled with this in class, and I honestly didn't even remember what I had put in these headings, but now this makes sense to me. Okay, so DNA testing has improved. Okay, over time, first of all, we didn't have DNA testing at all. But as time progresses, all of our technologies and methodologies get better. So DNA testing has improved over time. Scientists have learned more about organisms because of better DNA testing. Therefore, some organisms have actually been moved to different domains or kingdoms because they didn't think that they fit in these other kingdoms, and now they do because of the DNA testing has confirmed that or denied that as well. Okay, so DNA has been very important and it has changed the way things work now. All right, on to the next page. Okay, so when we talk about scientific names are very important. So think a minute, if animals weren't given scientific names, how would we keep them straight? What could we do so that we wouldn't have the confusion as to which animal is which? Is there another way of doing that? Think about that for a minute. Okay, so scientific names were given to animals by a very smart scientist named Carolus Linnaeus. Okay, Carolus Linnaeus thought that we're having too much confusion with these animals. These common names that we're using, everybody seems to be using a different common name. Or maybe they've got 10 different common names. Or maybe a different part of the world is calling it something altogether different. So he was smart enough to realize that there's a lot of confusion happening, and we can't have that. We need to find a system that will name animals so that each organism has only one scientific name, which is comprised of two separate words. Okay. So a scientific name is made of two names. First name is a genus. Second name is a specific or a species name. Okay, so you've got this one, Pygocentrus naturi. I'm not sure how you say that, but that's what a red-bellied piranha is. That's its scientific name. So the first part, Pygocentrus, is the genus name, and Naturiri, or however you say it, is the specific or species name. So there will be other organisms that are called Pygocentrus, but they will not have the specific name the same. Only one organism, one species is going to have that last name. Okay, when you write scientific names, there are rules to doing that. A scientific name is made up of a genus name and a specific name, always. The entire scientific name is underlined or written in italics. So if I'm writing the scientific name in my journal, I'm going to write it down and I'm going to underline it. If I'm typing the scientific name in my report, I'm going to italicize it, okay? There's a special little button where you can make it italics, okay? And that just kind of puts a slant on it, and that way it stands out from the rest of the writing that you have, and people can then identify that it is a scientific name, okay? So it's really important, just because we have the rule of two names, we still have to have some other rules around scientific naming to make sure that we don't get it confused, as you know, with the rest of the text as well. The first letter of the first part of a scientific name is always capitalized, and the second letter, the second part must always be lowercase. Okay, so see how this one is written, the Pygocentrus naturi. It's got a capital P, but it does not have a capital N on the species name. Okay, that is a small n, and it's done like that on purpose. Okay, so that we don't confuse it, so we understand it's a scientific name. Okay, there was a really good video describing this, but unfortunately we can't watch it because I don't have enough internet bandwidth in order to do that. So maybe if I can get that working, I can show you guys at school. Actually, I can show you guys in class. Okay, so I hope there's not too much confusion over scientific names. They're really important. And Mr. Linnaeus was a very smart man, so we're very happy that he did that for us. Okay, next up. Okay, next up, we're going to talk about archaea, bacteria, and viruses. Luckily, you don't need to know much about archaea. Archaea is really cool organisms, but we don't want to get into too much detail right now. We don't need to worry about that. So, archaea, but the one thing that is really neat is archaea are more similar to eukaryotes than they are to bacteria. You would think that because archaea and bacteria are both prokaryotic, that they would be more similar to each other, but they're not. Archaea is more similar to eukaryotic cells than bacteria are. That's amazing. Okay, archaea live in extreme environments, harsh environments. Okay, what does that mean? Hot springs. Okay, hot springs. The water in a hot spring can be upwards 120 degrees. That's insane. That burns our skin. You know, it's way too hot for us, yet they seem to love it. Okay, they live in very acidic environments. Okay, so very acidic. Again, we can't live in an acidic environment. If acid touches our skin for too long, it starts to corrode it. It starts to eat away at our skin. It's not good for us. They live in salty environments, very, very high salinity, lots of salt. Near deep sea vents. Okay, I showed you video of deep sea vents in the classroom. Those were those vents that were underwater that were spewing out the black smoke. Looks like black smoke coming out of there. Again, very extreme environment, very hot temperatures, and sometimes very high um, compounds coming out of there. Okay, and they can also live 8 kilometers below the Earth's surface. Nothing else lives 8 kilometers below the surface. That's insane, right? So archaea are really extremely cool organisms, and they live in very extreme environments. Okay, so remember that for the exam. Now, bacteria. We should know more about bacteria. Are all bacteria bad? Are there good bacteria? So, yeah, bacteria can be bad. It can make us very sick, but not all of it is bad. There are some good bacteria. Okay, and then scientists, they classify bacteria according to their shape. So it's easier for them to look at the shape of a bacteria and say, okay, it falls into this category. So we can keep all of these ones that look similar together, and they all usually have similar characteristics about them as well. So there are 3 different shapes. You've got round ones, which are just circles. You've got rod ones, which are usually a little longer than in this picture, a little longer. And then you've got spiral, which are just little squiggles when you're drawing them. Okay. And you'll have to draw these and label these on the exam. So please remember these shapes. When you get into the higher grades in M3, M4, you're going to learn way more about these shapes. There's different scientific names for each of these shapes. Round is called cocci. Bacteria are bacilli, I believe. I can't remember, but they all have different names that are similar to that, but they're more scientific. So for us, we just need to learn the simple names for them. And then when you get into the upper grades, you'll learn more about these bacteria. Okay, and in class, we looked at each one of them to see a bad bacteria and see what they do. The round ones were, let me think here. Strep throat. So we get a very sore throat from those types of bacterial infections. Rod ones were like E. coli, which we get very, very bad food poisoning from because it's contaminated with feces, which is not very good. And then the spiral ones were Lyme's disease from little ticks that can bite us and stuff like that. But you don't have to worry about those. You're not hiking in the woods. All right. Continuing on. We're almost done, guys. Okay, we've got 2 slides to go. I'm sure you want to be done this. You're almost done. Okay, a very important part of the bacteria life cycle is binary fission. Okay, binary fission is a type of asexual reproduction. So organisms, all organisms, anything that's alive will reproduce either sexually or asexually. Most prokaryotic single-celled organisms use binary fission as a way of reproducing. Okay, and that's an asexual reproduction. There's also budding. I don't know if you remember budding, where a little bud starts out the side of it and it just gets larger and larger until it becomes the same size and it's the exact same type as the organism. Okay, one cell splits into 2 cells and they are both identical to each other. And binary fission, you start with, we call it a parent cell. Okay, so the first cell, we call it the parent cell to keep things straight. We can keep it organized. First thing that happens in binary fission is you've got the replication of DNA. If this DNA does not replicate, you're going to have problems because you won't have enough DNA to make more cells, more bacteria. So this has to happen perfectly in order for it to continue to reproduce and make healthy cells that will go and do what they need to do. So the replication of the DNA happens first. When that's done, then it starts to elongate, starts to get longer, and then it starts to pinch off in between. Okay, the pinching off finally pinches it right off until there are 2 exact cells that are identical to the very first parent cell. So we call the parent cell the first cell. When you have this binary fission happening, at the end of it, you've got 2 identical daughter cells. Okay, we call them daughter cells now. Okay, so that's binary fission, and again, very interesting process. That's really cool. All right, and the last page. Now we're talking about viruses. Okay, so we've talked about archaea. Archaea live in very extreme environments. Archaea are more closely related to eukaryotes than they are to other bacteria, which is amazing. Okay, we've gone through bacteria. We've talked about bacteria, how they reproduce by binary fission. Bacteria are also classified according to the shape of them, round, rod, or spiral. Yeah, so bacteria. And again, archaea and bacteria are prokaryotic. They're single-celled organisms for the most part. And you would think, well, viruses fit into that profile. They look exactly like them. No, actually, viruses are weird. Viruses are technically not made of cells. Viruses are simply made of protein and DNA. They're not made of cells. So, because viruses are not made of cells, they need to find a cell in order to be able to make more copies of itself. So, the first one here, a virus needs a host cell to start to the process of replication. Okay? We say that viruses replicate. They don't actually reproduce because reproduction happens in living things, not in things that we consider not to be living. Okay, viruses, we do not consider them to be alive because they don't share the same characteristics of living things that other living things have. So viruses replicate, they don't reproduce. So a host cell, so what is a host cell? A host cell is a living thing that a virus or a parasite uses for resources or shelter. Okay, so a virus will use a host cell to make new copies of itself or just to hang out in for a while. Okay, so it can use it as a shelter. Sometimes viruses don't start replication right away. Sometimes they go into a cell and lay dormant. It's called dormant. So they just use the cell as a shelter until they're ready to make more viruses. When a virus replicates in a host cell, the host cell is destroyed. Okay. So when we looked at, again, we looked at the cycle of the lytic cycle, is what it's called, when a virus replicates. Okay. So the virus will go into the cell or even just sit on top of a cell, a host cell. And if it goes into the cell, it will inject its DNA into the cell. If it sits on top of a cell, it will do the same thing. It will drill a little hole into the cell and put its DNA into the cell, where that DNA then starts to make pieces of virus. And it's the same thing when it goes into a cell. It'll make pieces of virus. Once those pieces are all made, it starts to assemble the virus into like the pieces into a virus. They make many, many, many viruses within a cell. And when it can't hold any more viruses, it just erupts. Okay. And then all the viruses are then, they are let into your body, and then they go to find other host cells to infect and to make more viruses. And that's why when you get a cold or when you get the flu, that's why it takes some time for you to get really, really sick, because it takes time for these viruses to build up in your system. So, yeah, it's just all the circle of life. Hey, so viruses are interesting, though. Are they alive? Why or why not? Our book says no, they are not alive. And I tend to agree with this too, because we went over the 5 characteristics that all living cells have. First of all, they're made of cells. Next, they respond to stimuli. They use energy. They reproduce and they grow. Okay. And there's lots of things about viruses that don't do that. Okay. So, viruses alive? No, they don't use energy from nutrients. They have to have a host cell in order to do anything. So they use the host cell, and the host cell is able to use energy to make more viruses. Okay. Viruses do not maintain homeostasis. It does not matter what temperature is inside. It does not matter water content. Unlike cells, cells are very temperature dependent, water dependent, things like that. Viruses do not respond to stimuli. Okay, so amazing. How do you not respond to stimuli? A stimuli, remember, is something that makes us change our behavior. So, for instance, if I'm outside on a hot day and the sun is beating down on me and I'm so hot, okay, that's my stimuli. The stimuli is the sun is making me really hot. So, what am I going to do? I'm going to respond to that stimuli. I'm either going to go inside where it's air conditioned, or I'm going to take my jacket off, or I'm going to get a drink of water, or I'm going to put my umbrella up so I have some shade. Okay, so that's responding to the stimuli, and viruses don't do that. And the other thing, viruses don't grow like we grow. We go from toddler to to child to teenager to adult. We grow. They don't grow. So they simply are one size. They assemble. They are the same size in the cell. They go out. They go into other cells. They do not get larger. They do not grow. They are the same size. It is really weird. Anyway, I hope that you have all enjoyed this. I hope you've learned something from it. I hope you already knew this stuff because I hope you were paying attention in class. So if you have any questions, by all means, ask me before the exam. I will be happy to go over any of this again. If I'm not around, ask your fellow students, okay? Ask your friends. Chances are they'll know. And if they don't know, look in your notebook, look in your little workbook, okay? The answers are all in there. And I go closely with that workbook so that you always have the answers close at hand, okay? All right, guys, this has been a pleasure. I hope you learned something. Sorry my slideshow didn't work this time, but best I can do. All right, see you guys. See you next time. And I will turn this off in a minute once I get this all sorted out. All right, bye-bye, guys.